I've been doing a lot of talk about the southern border lately and the sovereignty of Texas, as well as the sovereignty of the United States. I had a private message come through from an anonymous and vetted trusted source. Our anonymous source, who we're going to refer to as Silent Rider, is a Border Patrol transport specialist. We're not even doing an intro today. We're going right in. We are going right into this podcast. And with that, we welcome Silent Rider to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on, Brian. I appreciate it.
I sincerely appreciate you doing what you're doing. I want you to explain what this process is like from start to go.
The private company is looking for individuals, men and women, preferably with military background or law enforcement background. And essentially, they're riding the buses with these immigrants from one of the border cities where they're held at up to a sanctuary city somewhere in the United States. These cities, as we all see in the news, usually consist either of Chicago, Denver, New York City. Those are the main places that we're taking these migrants to. So from start to finish, you send in your information, you apply for the job. It's a contract job. They actually pay pretty well. You can make up to $700 a day. Average is about $400. And essentially what you're doing is you're waiting at a staging point, and you and your partner will then get the call that, hey, it's time to ride the bus or go on a mission. From that point, you'll proceed down to one of the cities, as we've all seen on the news, Eagle Pass, Del Rio, these cities that border Texas and outside the United States. And you will make your way to a pickup point. At the pickup point, you will see hundreds of migrants that have flooded one of these centers. They're going through medical, they're going, I think, through dental also, but definitely medical. They're being vetted, they're getting COVID shots, and they're boarding the bus. And the job of the specialist, the bus transportation specialist, is to take their state-issued phone, which is issued by the Texas Department of Emergency Management. They're in the play too, TDEM, and you're scanning their wristband. It feels surreal because it almost feels like cattle, but you're loading them on the bus, scanning their wristbands, and then you start your journey. They're not allowed to get off the bus anywhere in Texas. However, if you're leaving, let's say, Eagle Pass, and you're trying to make it to Denver or New York, once you're outside of Texas, they're allowed to disembark, go into gas stations, buy food, etc. And they're also allowed to discharge on their own accord. Here's what's kind of scary. Let's say we stop in Louisiana on the way to New York, and you got to refuel, and the riders get off the bus and they go into a gas station. At that point, if they decide, I no longer want to make the trip, because they're not prisoners and we're not armed, they have the right to get off the bus. We take their wristband, we keep it, and we log them in as discharging on their own accord. There's some back actions and some backlashes to that. If they do that, they're no longer legally seeking asylum because they're discharging on their own accord before the destination. But a lot of times they'll meet up with family along the road or at a gas station, or someone will take them, put them in the car, and they'll be off on their merry way. The issue is this person is now not only undocumented, but they're uncounted. There's no accountability. If we left Eagle Pass with 50 passengers and 20 of them get off the bus, those 20 can now go out and integrate however they see fit. And I'm not saying it'll be a bunch of illegal actions or whatever, but they can integrate into society completely unaccounted for, undocumented. We know their names, and then that's it. Everyone else makes it to the destination. They get off, and we come in contact with the non-government official through a secret phone line. That NGO then picks up the migrants and does whatever with them, taking them to schools, shelters, cities throughout this sanctuary city. But they're at capacity to the point where schools, abandoned schools, old schools are being overrun, hotels are being overran. This is 14, 15 buses of 50 passengers a day leaving Texas, going to one of those cities that I mentioned. These cities are flooded. They're overpopulated. You can see on the news, their mayors are now making decisions saying, hey, we're going to find the bus companies. We're going to sue the bus companies. You can't just drop people off with even advance notice. But this is really, really putting a strain on the infrastructure and resources in these cities. More importantly, I feel bad for the people. I mean, they're walking through jungles and crossing borders and walking miles, all in hopes of a better life and the American dream, which I'm all about, but it has to be done the right way, or our internal system is probably going to collapse because we can't handle that many people in influx coming over, needing everything. They don't even have bags, no luggage with them. They're just literally the clothes on their back.
The majority of Americans agree with everything that you just said. We are a nation of immigrants, and I fully support people coming here to want to change their life. There's checks and balances that need to happen. Where is the drop point, and who is meeting you from these cities, whether it's Chicago, Denver, or New York City? Who is meeting you, and how do they greet you? Are they very upset? Are they welcoming? Are they furious? Explain when you pull in and how you're greeted.
What's weird is it's a different person every trip you do. They're NGOs, of course, non-government officials. So I think that their heart is in the right place because they are pretty welcoming. Like, hey, we're here to help. We're here to get these people not on the streets of America, get them resources, get them help. So we're, as transportation specialists, we're greeted fairly warmly, but there's also some frustration in their voices because of the behind the scenes work that they know. Their heart is in the right place. So their heart says, I want to help. These are people that are in our country. I want to help. And so good on them for that. But I think the frustration comes in the point of they know that the supplies and resources to help are extremely limited. They know that these people aren't coming over and falling into a life of milk and honey, for lack of a better word, because the resources are strained. And so that's where the frustration on their part comes in at. We'll normally contact them about 2 minutes out from the drop. Sometimes we have to change the drop because of police presence and sometimes harassment by citizens and things like that. So we'll change the drop sometimes and they'll say, hey, meet us here at this location. And we'll drive to that location, the charter bus will, and we'll drop them off from that point. So I think that they're happy to help, but they understand that we don't really have the assets and built-in infrastructure to truly help. And what's sad is these people are, kind of sold a dream because everybody looks at the American dream and the American way. And so they think that, hey, I finally made it. I have nothing, but I'm here. My family and I have made it to the United States. And really what they're greeted with is not the American dream, not really a bunch of resources. They're greeted with just more triumph and more agony because now they're hurting. And think about all the cities that I named. Especially this time of year, these places are freezing. Like people will die outside of Chicago and Denver this time of year. So when the shelters become unsanitary and overflowing, now these people are roaming the streets. And it's not safe for anyone, much less women and children, to be on the streets in Chicago this time of year. So they have to seek some kind of refuge, some kind of shelter. That's the sad part. It's like sanctuary cities are saying, hey, I want to be a sanctuary city until it's time to do what sanctuary cities do. They just don't have the infrastructure to support what we have right now, which is a wide open border. Politics aside, that's what we have. We have a wide open border in the United States, and we're saying, come on through, and we're going to do a background. We're going to do some slight vetting, but everybody's welcome. And we just don't have the money and resources to do that as a country.
No, we don't. Until the American people wake up, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. Folks, this has nothing to do with the left or right. This has to do with America now. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on. We need to protect our nation's sovereignty. And if we don't do so, we will not have a country. And sometimes I ask myself, are we even still a country? Because when you don't have sovereignty, you don't have a country. Have you ever felt scared or ever been threatened on one of these buses?
So I haven't. You aren't allowed to be armed during the buses. And I think the primary reason for that is if you look at the gun laws in Texas versus the sanctuary cities, like those are quite different gun laws. Let's say you have a Texas concealed carry. Well, there's no reciprocity in the states that you'd cross going from Texas to New York or Texas to Denver. So for that reason, you aren't allowed to be armed. There's no real need for arming. I've never felt scared. I've never felt like my life was in danger because these people are pretty, I think maybe hospitable is the right word, or pretty compliant because remember, they're sold on a dream. They think that they are going to better, which in turn, it likely is a lot better than where they came from, but they think they're going to better. So that makes them really compliant when you're saying, hey, sit down, don't trash the bus, do things like that. So they're pretty compliant because they see hopes and dreams of a better future. So no real issues out of them. There is a lot of sickness. I would wear a mask on the bus because they do come over with RSV and different types of illnesses. And it's not to say that we don't have those in the United States, but that's certainly not helping when you add in a few 100,000 people in a few months' time that does need healthcare. Like you said earlier, that's just only going to put a strain on our system. And I don't even blame the people, because if I'm a man or a woman with kids, I too will walk through jungles and get my family to a safe place and get them the best life possible, which they're looking at America as that. So I don't blame them. I don't even mind them coming, but there has to be a system in place outside of what we're seeing right now, which is just a mass influx of people with no vetting or no funding for the infrastructure and resources that they're going to need, to include the education level. And this isn't to talk bad about them, but they're not American way educated, right? So when they come over, the jobs that they really kind of qualify for are those frontline custodial type, hotel cleaning type jobs. So they don't even have the means. And we know how hard it is for the average American citizen that's making a good salary. Like, you find yourself struggling sometimes going from check to check with financial problems. So these people, when they come in, and I hate to refer to them as these people, but when the migrants come in with low levels of education, no real skill sets, nothing to really legalize them in the United States, they can't find work really in a lot of cases doing that. And when people can't find work and they have to feed their families, they're going to resort, like most of us would, by any means necessary to get what they need for their families. And that can take a turn for the worse and be its own rabbit hole, but they're desperate. So it's like, I think we have some fault here as Americans, because we're saying, hey, our borders are open and we're going to provide for you. But when you get here, our borders are open, but we can't really provide for you. We're going to put you into a system, into a gauntlet that's just going to put a strain on the economy and the current infrastructure and resources.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.